Marcus Chen opened his eyes to a world of crystalline light. The pain came next, sharp and radiating through his ribs, where something had struck him during the explosion. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, wrong somehow. The gravity was different here. He blinked against the brightness, and slowly the shapes around him came into focus. Walls that seemed to be made of living glass surrounded him, pulsing with faint blue light that moved like blood through veins. This was not the Perseverance. This was not any human vessel. Marcus pushed himself up to sitting, wincing as his injured ribs protested. His uniform was torn and stained with dried blood, but he was alive. That fact surprised him more than anything else. He remembered the attack, the way the alien ship had appeared from nowhere, sleek and predatory. He remembered the Perseverance breaking apart under weapons fire, the screams of his crew cutting short as the hull breached. He remembered being thrown across the bridge and then nothing until now. "You are awake," a voice said. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, translated directly into his mind in a way that made his teeth ache. Marcus looked up and saw her. She stood on the other side of the transparent wall, impossibly tall, perhaps 7 feet or more. Her body was covered in plates of chitinous armor that shimmered between deep purple and black. Her face was angular and alien, with eyes that shifted through colors Marcus had no names for. When she moved, it was with a grace that seemed wrong for something so large and armored. "I am Shiranai Velkoth," the voice continued, though her mouth did not move in sync with the words. "Interrogator Commander of the Vakoth Empire." Marcus said nothing. He studied her, trying to understand what he was dealing with. "You are Commander Marcus Chen of the human vessel Perseverance," she continued. "Your ship violated Vakoth territorial space 3 days ago." "We were on a survey mission," Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse. "We had no idea this space was claimed." "Ignorance is not innocence," Shiranai replied. She moved closer to the wall, and Marcus could see his reflection in her shifting eyes. "Your vessel's navigation data has been recovered." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The navigation data would contain Earth's location, the positions of human colonies, everything. "I see you understand," Shiranai said, and there was something like satisfaction in her translated tone. "The Vakoth Empire now knows where your homeworld lies." "Then why am I still alive?" Marcus asked. Shiranai tilted her head in a gesture that might have been curiosity. "Because you have value," she said. "You will provide us with intelligence on human military capabilities, population centers, defensive installations." "No," Marcus said simply. "No, you say that now," Shiranai replied, and her voice carried absolute confidence. "You do not yet understand what you face." She gestured, and the wall between them shimmered and became opaque. Marcus was alone again in the crystalline cell. He stood slowly, testing his injuries. 2 ribs were definitely cracked. His left shoulder was badly bruised, and he had a collection of cuts and scrapes. But he could move, and that meant he could think. He began to examine his prison. The walls were seamless and appeared to be some kind of force field rather than solid matter. The floor was solid enough beneath his feet, but it had the same living quality as everything else, like he was inside some vast organism rather than a ship. There was no door that he could see, no visible controls or weak points. He was trapped as completely as it was possible to be. Marcus sat down again, back against the wall, and began to take stock of his situation. His crew was dead. He had to accept that. The Perseverance was destroyed. Earth's location was compromised. He was alone, in the hands of an alien empire that clearly had no intention of treating him kindly. The logical thing to do would be to cooperate, to bargain for his life. But Marcus had not survived 3 tours in the outer reaches by doing the logical thing. The wall shimmered and became transparent again. Shira and I stood there, watching him with those impossible eyes. "I have studied your species," she said. "Humans are fragile, both physically and mentally. The Vakoth have existed for 10,000 of your years," she continued. "In that time, we have encountered 147 sentient species. We have perfected the art of extracting compliance." "Every species breaks," Shira and I said, and there was no malice in her voice, only certainty. "Some quickly, some slowly, but all eventually surrender their will to ours. You will be no different." Marcus met her gaze, and something hardened in his chest. "You're wrong," he said quietly. Shira and I made a sound that might have been laughter. "They all say that at first," she replied. "Your defiance is noted and expected. It will make the documentation more interesting." She gestured again, and images appeared in the air between them. Marcus saw other beings, aliens of shapes and sizes he could barely comprehend, all in cells similar to his. He watched as they were subjected to things he could not name, technologies that seemed to reach into their minds and pull out their sanity by the roots. He watched them break, and weep, and surrender. "This is what awaits you," Shira and I said. "The only variable is how long you will endure before you accept the inevitable." Marcus looked at the images, and then, back at her. "I was born on Earth," he said. "Do you know what that means?" Shira and I's eyes shifted through another spectrum. "Your planet of origin is irrelevant," she said. "It means my species spent 200,000 years learning how to survive on a world that tried to kill us every single day," Marcus replied. "We learned to endure ice ages and droughts, and predators bigger and faster than us. We learned to keep going when there was no logical reason to keep going. We learned that the difference between extinction and survival is just refusing to give up." He stood and walked to the walls separating them. "So yes, I'm fragile," he said. "Yes, I'm alone. Yes, you're going to hurt me in ways I can't even imagine yet. But I'm also human," Marcus said, and his voice was steady. "And humans don't know how to quit." For a long moment, Shira and I simply looked at him. Then the wall went opaque again, and Marcus was alone. He sat back down and began to prepare himself. He did not know what was coming, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not break. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. They could take everything from him, but they could not take his choice to remain himself. Marcus Chen closed his eyes and began to remember. He remembered his daughter's face, the sound of rain on Earth's oceans, the smell of coffee in the morning. He built a fortress in his mind from memories and determination. The Vakoth thought they had captured a human. What they had actually done was give Marcus Chen a reason to prove what humanity really meant. And that was going to be their first mistake. The darkness came without warning. One moment Marcus was in his cell, and the next moment there was nothing. No light, no sound, no sensation against his skin. He could not see his hands in front of his face. He could not hear his own breathing. The sensory deprivation was absolute, and it was terrifying. Marcus knew what this was, psychological warfare designed to break down his sense of self. Without external stimuli, the human mind began to turn inward, and eventually turn against itself. He had read about experiments like this, prisoners who hallucinated or lost their grip on reality after only hours. But reading about something and experiencing it were completely different things. The silence pressed against his ears like physical weight. The darkness was so complete it seemed to have texture. Marcus could feel panic rising in his chest, his heart racing even though his body had nothing to react to. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted his heartbeats. When he reached 100, he started over. He recited poetry he had memorized in school, old poems about Earth and space and humanity reaching for the stars. When he ran out of poems, he sang psalms in his head. When he ran out of songs, he began to build spaceships. He imagined the Perseverance, piece by piece. Every panel, every rivet, every system. He walked through her corridors in his mind, visiting each member of his crew. He had conversations with them, remembered their jokes and their dreams. Time became meaningless in the dark. He might have been there for hours or days. But Marcus refused to let the silence take him. He filled it with everything human he could remember. Then the light returned, and it was blinding. Marcus gasped and shielded his eyes. He was back in his cell, and Shiranai was watching him through the transparent wall. 68 hours, she said. Most species begin to show cognitive breakdown after 12. Marcus blinked away tears from the sudden brightness. His throat was raw. He must have been screaming at some point, though he had no memory of it. You endured longer than expected, Shiranai continued. But endurance alone is not victory. The wall shimmered, and she entered his cell. This close, Marcus could see the intricate patterns in her armor, could smell something like ozone and metal. Now we begin the next phase, she said. Marcus felt something change in the air around him. It started as a subtle unease, a feeling that something was wrong. Then it grew. Fear crashed over him like a physical wave. Not fear of something specific, but pure existential dread. The certainty that everything was hopeless, that nothing mattered, that he should simply give up and die. His mind screamed at him that this was not real, that it was technology manipulating his brain chemistry. But knowing something intellectually did not make the feeling go away. The despair was overwhelming. Marcus fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He could barely breathe through the weight of hopelessness crushing his chest. In the midst of the artificial despair, Marcus reached for something small. He thought about his daughter laughing when he pushed her on a swing. He thought about the smell of coffee his pilot had made every morning. Terrible and burned but made with care. He thought about the stupid joke his navigator had told just before the attack. Something about a photon checking into a hotel with no baggage. The memories hurt because they were gone, because everyone he loved was dead, or impossibly far away. But they were his, and they were real. The despair was artificial, but the love was genuine. Marcus clung to that difference, like a lifeline. Interesting. Shiranai's voice came from somewhere above him. Your neural patterns show extreme distress, but also unexpected resistance. The crushing hopelessness intensified. Marcus sobbed, but he kept thinking about the swing, the coffee, the joke. He kept choosing to remember rather than surrender. Finally the pressure lifted. Marcus collapsed onto his side, gasping. Every muscle in his body ached from tension. He had no idea how long that had lasted. Minutes or hours. 42 minutes, Shiranai said, answering his unasked question. The previous record for your neural pressure level was 9 minutes before complete psychological collapse. She crouched beside him, her alien face unreadable. Why do you resist? She asked. What purpose does it serve? Marcus looked up at her through tears. Because it's my choice, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Over the following days, or what Marcus assumed were days, Shiranai escalated her methods. She showed him simulations of Earth burning, of cities reduced to ash. She made him watch his daughter die in 100 different ways, each more horrible than the last. She showed him humanity being absorbed into the Vakoth Empire, humans reduced to slaves or cattle. She told him that his resistance changed nothing, that Earth would fall whether he cooperated or not. Through it all, Marcus broke down again and again. He wept and screamed and begged for it to stop. But he never gave her what she wanted. He never provided intelligence, never betrayed his people, never surrendered his will. After each session, Shiranai would observe him in his cell. She watched him exercise despite his injuries, doing push-ups and sit-ups with shaking arms. She watched him scratch marks on the wall to count the days. She watched him talk to himself, telling stories to fill the silence. Your behavior is irrational, she told him one day. You know you cannot win. You know your resistance is meaningless. Yet you persist. Explain this to me. Marcus looked at her and smiled, despite the bruises on his face. Have you ever heard of the Spartans at Thermopylae? He asked. Shiranai's eyes shifted colors. I do not know this reference. So Marcus told her the story. He told her about 300 warriors who stood against an army of thousands. He told her how they knew they would die, but chose to stand anyway. He told her about people throughout human history who resisted tyranny, knowing they would lose. We do it because it matters, Marcus said. We do it because even if we can't win, we can choose not to lose our humanity. We do it because someone has to. Shiranai was quiet for a long time. That is not logical, she finally said. No, Marcus. Agreed. But it's human. Something in Shiranai's posture changed. She tilted her head in that gesture of curiosity. Tell me more about humans, she said. And Marcus did. He told her about parents who sacrificed everything for their children. He told her about artists who created beauty for its own sake. He told her about people who helped strangers for no benefit to themselves. He told her about love and hope, and the stubborn refusal to give up, even when giving up was the rational choice. Shiranai listened. She did not understand, but she was beginning to realize that this human represented something her species had never encountered before. Not just biological resistance, but philosophical resistance. Marcus Chen was not strong because humans were physically superior. He was strong because he had chosen to be, again and again, despite every reason to quit, and that choice was something the Vakoth had no weapon against. For the first time in her long career, Shiranai Velkoff felt something she could not name. It might have been doubt. It might have been curiosity. It might have been the first crack in a worldview that had stood for 10,000 years. She looked at the battered human in the crystalline cell, and wondered if perhaps the Vakoth had made a terrible mistake. Not in capturing him, but in assuming that breaking him was possible at all. Weeks passed in the crystalline prison. Shiranai found herself spending more time with the human than her duties required. She told herself it was professional interest, a desire to understand this anomaly. But something deeper was happening, and she knew it. The Vakoth prided themselves on logic and efficiency. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was inefficiency. Their entire civilization was built on the cold calculation of power and the systematic application of force. For 10,000 years, this philosophy had served them well. They had conquered star systems, absorbed dozens of species, built an empire that spanned a quarter of the galaxy. And they had done it all by breaking the will of anyone who stood against them. Until Marcus Chen. Shiranai sat across from him in his cell, the barrier between them temporarily lowered. Marcus was thin now, his body showing the effects of weeks of stress and inadequate care. Nutrition, but his eyes were still clear, and his voice was still steady. Tell me about the Vakoth, he said. Tell me how your empire began. Shiranai considered the question. No prisoner had ever asked about her people before. They were usually too focused on their own suffering. We were once like you, she said finally. Fragmented, emotional, inefficient. We fought among ourselves for resources and territory. Then came the Great Unification, a philosophical revolution that recognized emotion as the source of all conflict. We engineered it out of our genetics, Shiranai continued. We created technologies to suppress the neurological basis of attachment, love, fear. We became what we are now, logical, unified, unstoppable. Marcus nodded slowly. And what did you lose? He asked. The question caught Shiranai off guard. We lost nothing, she said. We eliminated weakness. What did you lose? Marcus repeated. Did you have art before? Music? Poetry? Do you have children that you love? Do you have friends who matter to you more than their utility? Have you ever done something just because it made you happy? Shiranai found she had no answers to these questions. Art existed in Vakov culture but only as efficient communication of information. Music was mathematical patterns designed for optimal neural processing. Children were raised collectively and assigned to roles based on aptitude. Friendship was a concept she understood academically, but had never experienced. Those things are irrelevant to survival and expansion, she said. Marcus smiled sadly. Those things are survival, he replied. They're what we're surviving for. He leaned forward despite the pain it clearly caused. I had a daughter, he said. Her name was Sarah. She's 14 now, or she would be if time dilation hasn't made a liar out of me. She asked me why I had to go to space. I told her it was important work, that we were exploring and learning. She said that was nice, but she wished I could stay home and help her build sandcastles instead. Marcus's eyes were distant, seeing something Shiranai could not. I spent the next month teaching myself everything about sandcastle architecture, he continued. I read about engineering principles and structural integrity and sand grain composition. And when I got home, I spent 3 days at the beach with her, building the most elaborate, ridiculous sandcastles you've ever seen. We knew the tide would wash them away. We knew they served no purpose. But when Sarah laughed and jumped around our castle city, I was happier than I'd ever been in my entire life. Shiranai found herself leaning forward, listening with an intensity she did not understand. That's what being human means, Marcus said. It means caring. About things that logic says don't matter. It means choosing joy, even when joy is temporary. It means loving people, even though they'll die. It means building sandcastles, even though the tide will wash them away. Over the following days, Shiranai found herself initiating conversations rather than interrogations. She asked Marcus about human history, and he told her stories. He told her about people who had stood against impossible odds. He told her about the Underground Railroad, about ordinary people risking everything to free strangers from slavery. He told her about the resistance fighters in World War II, about partisans who fought knowing they would likely die. He told her about Malala Yousafzai, a girl who was shot for advocating education and who stood up again and kept fighting. He told her about the Tiananmen Square protests, about one man facing down tanks. We have a history of this, Marcus said. We have a history of people who chose meaning over survival, who chose to remain human even when it cost them everything. Shiranai began to notice things she had never paid attention to before. She observed her fellow Vakoth moving through the ship with perfect efficiency and zero joy. She listened to their communications and heard only data exchange, never laughter or warmth. She looked at her own life, centuries of service to the Empire, and realized she could not remember a single moment of genuine happiness. She had pride in her competence, she had satisfaction in her efficiency, but happiness, joy, love? Those were alien concepts, and she was the alien. One night, during another session with Marcus, she asked the question that had been building in her mind. If you could eliminate pain, would you? She asked. If you could remove the capacity for suffering, for grief, for fear, would you do it? Marcus thought about this carefully. No, he said finally, because pain teaches us. Grief is the price we pay for love. Fear keeps us alive, and overcoming fear makes us brave. If you eliminate the bad, you eliminate the good too. You can't have courage without fear. You can't have joy without sadness. You can't have love without the risk of loss. He met her shifting gaze. Your people eliminated weakness, he said, but I think they eliminated everything that makes life worth living in the process. Shiranai stood abruptly and left the cell. She went to her quarters and stood in the darkness. For the first time in her long life, she felt something like loneliness. She had broken hundreds of prisoners from dozens of species. She had always felt nothing, not triumph, not guilt, only the satisfaction of a task completed efficiently. But Marcus had not broken. And in failing to break him, he had somehow broken something in her. She thought about sandcastles and laughter. She thought about choosing meaning over survival. She thought about a human who endured torture and despair and still found reasons to smile. The next day, Shiranai received a communication from the High Command. The message was brief and direct. The human prisoner has proven resistant beyond projected timelines. Terminate subject and proceed with invasion planning. Compliance is mandatory. Shiranai stared at the message for a long time. Terminating prisoners was standard protocol when they proved unproductive. Had done it hundreds of times without hesitation. But now, looking at Marcus through the monitor, watching him do push-ups despite his injuries, watching him count days on the wall, watching him remain stubbornly himself, she realized something profound. She could not do it. She did not want to do it. For the first time in her existence, Shiranai Velkoth chose to do something because it mattered to her, not because it was optimal. She chose to do something beautiful for no logical reason at all. She chose to help Marcus escape. And in making that choice, she became something her species had engineered away. She became capable of caring about someone else more than she cared about her own survival. She became, in the most fundamental way possible, more human than Velkoth. The alarm systems on the ship were sophisticated, but Shiranai had designed many of them. She knew their weaknesses. She went to Marcus's cell and lowered the barrier. He looked up in surprise. "What's happening?" he asked. "I am making a choice," Shiranai replied. "A very illogical, very human choice. I am going to help you escape." Marcus stood slowly, disbelief written across his face. "Why?" Shiranai's eyes shifted through a spectrum that might have been the Velkoth equivalent of a smile. "Because you asked me if I had ever done something just because it mattered to me," she said. The ship's alarm systems began to shriek within minutes of Marcus leaving his cell. Shiranai had known they would have very little time. She led Marcus through corridors that twisted and curved in ways that made his human eyes ache. The Velkoth ship was designed for efficiency, not comfort, and everything about it felt hostile to organic life. "This way," Shiranai said, her voice urgent in his mind. "The infiltrator bay is 3 levels down." They moved quickly but carefully. Shiranai had disabled several security protocols, but there were layers of redundancy she could not bypass without alerting the entire command structure. Marcus followed close behind her, his injured body protesting, but his will driving him forward. They encountered their first patrol at an intersection. 3 Velkoth warriors, each nearly as large as Shiranai, their armor bristling with weapons. They saw Marcus and immediately raised their weapons. Shiranai moved between them with impossible speed. Her armored fist struck the first warrior in what might have been a throat. Her other arm swept the second warrior's legs out from under him. The third warrior fired, but Shiranai had already moved, the energy blast scorching the wall where she had been standing. Marcus grabbed a piece of fallen equipment and swung it at the third warrior's head. The impact jarred his arms, but the warrior staggered. Shiranai finished the fight with brutal efficiency. "We have perhaps 5 minutes before reinforcements arrive," she said. "Move." They ran. Marcus's lungs burned, and his ribs screamed, but he pushed through the pain. They descended through access shafts that were clearly not designed for human anatomy. Marcus scraped his shoulders and banged his knees, but he kept moving. The infiltrator bay was a vast chamber filled with small, deadly-looking craft. Shiranai led him to one and began the startup sequence. This ship has navigation data for the nearest human outpost, she said. It also contains complete intelligence on Vakoth fleet positions, invasion plans, and technological specifications. Use it to save your people. Marcus climbed into the cockpit and looked back at her. Come with me, he said. Shiranai's eyes shifted through colors that might have been surprise. I cannot, she said. I am Vakoth. Your people would never trust me. Besides, someone must ensure the infiltrator bay doors open. The controls are not automated. Marcus understood what she was saying. Someone would have to stay behind and manually open the bay doors. Someone would have to ensure he escaped. Someone would have to face whatever punishment the Vakoth Empire reserved for traitors. No, he said, there has to be another way. Replied, this is my choice, Marcus Chen. Do not dishonor it by refusing. The ship's alarms intensified. Through the bay windows, Marcus could see Vakoth warriors converging on their position. Go, Shiranai said. Live. Tell your people about us. Help them survive what is coming. She closed the cockpit hatch before Marcus could respond. He watched through the canopy as she moved to the bay control station. Her hands moved across holographic interfaces with practiced precision. The massive bay doors began to grind open. Then the Vakoth warriors burst into the chamber. There were dozens of them, all armed, all focused on Shiranai. She did not fight. She stood at the controls, ensuring the doors opened fully, and simply waited. Marcus saw them surround her, saw weapons pointed at her from every angle. He saw her look up at his ship one last time, and he made a choice. Had spent weeks enduring torture because he refused to give up. He had survived because he chose meaning over survival. He had taught Shiranai what it meant to be human through his stubborn refusal to quit. Now she was making a human choice, sacrificing herself so he could live, and he could not let her do it alone. Marcus fired up the infiltrator's weapon systems. The controls were alien, but desperate situations made fast learners. He targeted the ship's reactor couplings, the junction points Shiranai had mentioned during one of their conversations. He fired. The explosions were immediate and catastrophic. Secondary blasts rippled through the bay as energy conduits overloaded. Warriors scattered as debris rained down. Shiranai looked up in shock. Marcus landed the infiltrator close to her position and opened the hatch. Get in, he screamed. Shiranai hesitated for only a moment. Then she ran, fired at her. But the explosions had created chaos. She leaped into the ship with inhuman grace, and Marcus was already accelerating before she had fully entered. They shot through the opening bay doors as the ship's reactor began to undergo cascade failure. The infiltrator was fast, faster than anything Marcus had ever piloted. Behind them, the Vakoth vessel was tearing itself apart as internal explosions multiplied. They cleared the ship just as the main reactor breached. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. Marcus did not slow down until they had jumped to faster-than-light travel, and the devastation was light years behind them. Then he finally breathed. Shiranai was silent in the cramped cockpit. Her body was too large for the space meant for a single infiltrator pilot. She was folded awkwardly, her armor scraping against the bulkheads. You came back, she said finally. You could have escaped. Chose to return. Yeah, Marcus said. That was incredibly stupid. Why did you do it? Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Because you taught me something important, he said. You taught me that choosing to be better than what you were made to be is the most human thing possible, even when an alien does it. Shiranai's eyes shifted through a spectrum Marcus had never seen before. If he had to guess, he would have said it was wonder. What have I done? She asked quietly. I have betrayed my species. I have abandoned my empire. I have thrown away centuries of service for one human who should mean nothing to me. What have I become? Marcus reached over and awkwardly patted her armored shoulder. "Human," he said simply. "You've become human." They traveled in silence for a time. The infiltrators' navigation systems guided them toward the nearest human outpost, a research station called Haven Point. It would take several days to reach it. Shiranai stared out at the stars rushing past. "They will hunt us," she said. "The Vakoth do not forgive traitors. They will send everything they have to find us and destroy us." "I know," Marcus replied. "I do not regret my choice," Shiranai continued, "but I am experiencing something I have never felt before. I believe it is fear. It is also something else, something I cannot name." Marcus understood. "Freedom," he said. "That's what you're feeling." "Freedom? The ability to choose your own path," Marcus explained. "Even when that path is dangerous. Even when it costs you everything. You chose me over your empire. You chose meaning over duty. That's freedom." Shiranai was quiet for a long time. "It is terrifying," she said. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Welcome to being human." Traveled through the void between stars. Marcus told Shiranai more stories. He told her about humanity's long struggle toward freedom and justice. He told her about people who had made impossible choices. He told her that she was not alone, that she had chosen to stand for something, and that mattered. Shiranai listened and learned. She was experiencing emotions her species had engineered away millennia ago. Fear, yes, but also hope, also wonder, also something that might have been the beginning of friendship. Two beings who should have been enemies, one who had tried to break the other, one who had taught the other what it meant to be unbreakable. Together, fleeing toward an uncertain future. Together, choosing humanity over survival. Together, proving that even the longest night of tyranny could end when someone chose to care more about meaning than power. Haven Point appeared on their sensors after 4 days of travel. The research station hung in space like a small collection of connected modules around a central hub. It was humanity's farthest outpost in this sector, a place where scientists studied exotic phenomena and watched for threats from the deep unknown. When Marcus transmitted his identification codes, the response was immediate chaos. "Perseverance was destroyed weeks ago," the communications officer said. "All hands were reported lost. How is this possible?" "It's a long story," Marcus replied. "I'm coming in, and I'm bringing someone you need to meet." The station's commander was a woman named Elena Vasquez. She met them in the docking bay with a full security contingent, weapons raised and ready. Marcus exited the infiltrator first, his hands visible and empty. He looked terrible, thin, bruised, his uniform in tatters, but his eyes were clear. His voice was steady. "Stand down," he said. "She's with me." Shiranai emerged from the infiltrator, and the security team tensed. She was enormous compared to the humans, her alien form towering over them. Her armor still bore scorch marks from their escape. Her eyes shifted through colors that made the humans uncomfortable. "This is Shiranai Velkoff," Marcus said. "She was my captor. She is now my ally. She has intelligence that could save billions of human lives." Commander Vasquez looked between Marcus and the alien. Her hand remained on her sidearm. "Explain," she said. So Marcus did. He told them everything. He told them about the Perseverance's destruction, about his capture, about the Vakoth Empire. He told them about weeks of interrogation and torture. He told them about Shiranai's choice to help him escape. He told them about the intelligence data stored in the infiltrators. "Systems. The Vakoth know where Earth is," he said. "They're planning an invasion. Shiranai has their fleet positions, their technologies, their strategies. Everything we need to prepare." The room was silent. Finally, Commander Vasquez spoke. "Why should we trust her?" she asked. "She tortured you for weeks. She's part of an empire that wants to destroy us." Marcus looked at Shiranai, then back at Vasquez. Because she chose to be better than what she was, he said. Because she risked everything to save me. Because she's proof that the Vakoth aren't invincible. If one of them can change, if one of them can choose humanity over empire, then we have hope. Over the following days, Shiranai was questioned extensively. She shared everything she knew. She provided detailed intelligence on Vakoth military capabilities. She explained their psychological warfare techniques. Humanity, the tools they would need to resist. But the process was difficult for her. Shiranai was experiencing emotions she had no framework to understand. Guilt over betraying her species. Fear of what would happen when the Vakoth came hunting. Loneliness as she realized she belonged nowhere, neither with her people nor fully with humans. She sat alone in the quarters they had given her, too large for the furniture, too alien for comfort. Marcus found her there one evening. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Shiranai's eyes shifted through a troubled spectrum. "I do not know," she said. "I feel things I cannot name. I remember my life before. Centuries of service, certainty of purpose. Now I have nothing. I have betrayed everything I was for people who look at me with fear and suspicion." Marcus sat down beside her. "You didn't betray everything you were," he said. "You became something more than you were. The Vakoth made you a weapon. You chose to become a person." "I am not a person," Shiranai said. "I am Vakoth." "You're whatever you choose to be," Marcus replied. "That's the whole point. You made a choice. You chose me over your empire. You chose meaning over duty. That makes you more human than half the humans I've met." Shiranai made a sound that might have been laughter. "How can I be human when I am not human?" "Being human isn't about biology," Marcus said. "It's about choosing to care, even when caring hurts. It's about standing up for what matters, even when you know you'll lose. It's about refusing to give up on hope." He looked at her with genuine warmth. "You did all of that," he said. "You stood against your entire species because you believed there was something worth standing for. That's as human as it gets." The intelligence Shiranai provided transformed humanity's defensive capabilities. Scientists and military strategists pored over Vakoth technology specifications. They developed countermeasures against psychological warfare techniques. They identified weaknesses in Vakoth fleet formations. Humanity was still outmatched, but they were no longer helpless. Marcus recovered from his injuries. His ribs healed, and he regained the weight he had lost. But the scars ran deeper than the physical ones. He had nightmares about the sensory deprivation, about the neural pressure, about watching his world burn in simulations. Shiranai noticed. She found him one night after a particularly bad dream. "I am sorry," she said simply, "for what I did to you, for the pain I caused." Marcus looked at her. "You were doing what you thought was right," he said. "You were serving your empire the way you'd been programmed to. I don't blame you for that. I blame you for changing." Shiranai's eyes shifted in confusion. "You blame me for changing?" Marcus smiled. "That's a joke," he explained. "Humans sometimes say the opposite of what we mean for humor." "I don't blame you. I'm grateful you changed. You saved my life. You saved potentially billions of lives by sharing what you know. You prove that even the Vakoth's programming can be overcome." He stood and looked out the viewport at the stars. "When the Vakoth come, and they will come, humanity will be ready because of you," he said. "We'll survive because one alien chose to care about one human. That's not nothing. That's everything." Commander Vasquez called a meeting in the station's main briefing room. Marcus and Shiranai were both present. "We've analyzed all the intelligence you provided," Vasquez said. "Transmitted it to Fleet Command. Earth is mobilizing defenses. The outer colonies are being fortified. We have a chance now. Maybe not a good one, but a chance." She looked at Shiranai. Fleet Command wants you, she said. They want you to work as a liaison, to help coordinate our defensive strategies. They also want her to help us understand the Vakoth mindset. Shiranai was quiet for a moment. I will help however I can, she said. But you should know, the Vakoth will not stop. Even with what I have given you, they are formidable. They have resources and technologies I do not fully understand. They have conquered 147 species. I know, Vasquez replied, but they've never fought humans before. She looked at Marcus. They thought they could break one human in a cell. They were wrong. If they're wrong about one human, maybe they're wrong about all of us. Marcus felt something warm in his chest. It was pride, yes, but it was also hope. He looked at Shiranai and saw her eyes shifting through a spectrum that might have been the Vakoth equivalent of determination. We will face them together, Shiranai said. Vakoth and human, standing against the Empire. That is something they have never encountered before. Months later, Marcus stood on the bridge of a human warship. Shiranai was beside him, now wearing modified armor that bore both Vakoth and human insignia. The defense fleet was arrayed in formations designed using her intelligence. Humanity was ready. The Vakoth came exactly when Shiranai predicted they would. A massive fleet, hundreds of vessels, enough firepower to shatter worlds. But humanity did not break. They fought with tactics Shiranai had helped develop. They resisted psychological warfare with techniques Marcus had taught them. They stood together, humans who had learned that the difference between survival and extinction was choosing not to give up. The battle was fierce and costly. Many ships were lost. Many brave people died defending their species. But humanity held. And when the Vakoth fleet finally withdrew to regroup, they did so in confusion. They had never faced prey that refused to become victims. They had never encountered resistance that grew stronger rather than weaker. They had never fought an enemy who chose hope over logic. Marcus stood on the bridge and watched the Vakoth ships retreat. Shiranai stood beside him. They will return, she said. Yes, Marcus agreed. But we'll be ready. Because of you, Shiranai said. No, she said. Because of us. Because one human refused to break. Refusing to break, he taught one Vakoth what it meant to be more than a weapon. She looked at Marcus with something that might have been the Vakoth equivalent of a smile. You were right, she said. Humans don't endure because they are strong. They endure because they choose to. And in teaching me that, you gave humanity its greatest weapon against my people. What's that? Marcus asked. Hope, Shiranai replied. The absolute stubborn, illogical refusal to give up. The Vakoth have never encountered that before, and they have no defense against it. Marcus looked out at the stars, where human and alien had fought together for the first time. He thought about sandcastles and laughter. He thought about choosing meaning over survival. He thought about a tall alien who had learned to care when her entire species had forgotten how. We're going to win, he said. Not because we're stronger. Not because we're smarter. But because we're human. And being human means never giving up. Shiranai placed one massive hand on his shoulder. I understand now, she said. I understand why you could not be broken. Your heart, the human heart, is the most unbreakable thing in the universe. Because it chooses to remain whole, even when the entire universe tries to shatter it. Together they stood. One human who had endured everything to remain himself. One alien who had given up everything to become more than herself. Together they had proven that even the longest tyranny could end when someone chose to care. Together they had shown that humanity was not just a species, it was a choice. And that choice was stronger than any empire.